Good afternoon, everyone. We're coming to you from our WNY Field of Dreams studios here in suburban North Buffalo, the heart of the known universe. We're only a few blocks south of the downtown area in North Buffalo, known as Hurdle Avenue, where everything's happening. Our guest today is former County Executive Joel Giambra, who is running for state senate this year. In some district, it's kind of hard to know. I think it's SS 61, Joel, is that it?
It has a number 61, but we still don't know exactly where it is yet.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know, and since the legislature is still in session, they could be changing it right now.
Who knows?
Which is just crazy, and the Judge McAllister, challenged the legislature to change it if they didn't like his order. It's right in the order. So
Really?
As long as they stay in session, we don't know where you're running. How's
Interesting.
that?
I didn't know that factoid.
Well, okay. Listen, a little background on you. Tell us a little bit about where were you born, where'd you grow up, where you educated, where you live, how'd you get involved in politics, what offices you had,
Well,
blah, blah.
Peter, you and I have a lot of similarities. We both grew up poor. I grew up in the Lakeview housing projects where everybody had concrete floors, and I thought that was the norm. When we moved up to one block east of the projects, we had hardwood floors. It was like, wow. I didn't know these even existed, right?
You skipped linoleum then.
No linoleum. We were right from concrete to hardwood.
Okay.
It was like moving on up, right? But I remember the days in the Lakeview projects where everybody got along. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. Hispanics, African Americans, Latinos. We all lived together. We coexisted. And what kept us together was we had one common thread holding us all together, and that was we were all poor. And we all recognized that, but we all got along. Our families provided clean clothes for us, healthy meals. So where I grew up is where I would never trade in for the world because of the life experiences I received growing up in a diversified neighborhood.
Well, something I got to ask you about that. As you know, I grew up in the housing project in City Tonawanda, eating government cheese.
Did you have concrete or what?
Government cheese. I think we had linoleum. I don't remember wood.
Right.
We didn't have wood until we moved into the house my father built. But when we first moved in, it was bare wood floors because we moved into a half-finished house. My father at that time was making too much money, so we had to leave the housing project. So we moved into a half-finished house. And I remember my parents staying up at night finishing the hardwood floors. Honest to God, doing a few rows every night. So it was bare wood originally, but then they put down the tar paper and the hardwood, and they did it themselves. And
But you wouldn't trade it for the world, right?
You know what? I had a happy upbringing, but the one thing I got to say, and let me fly this by you. When we lived in the housing project, there was some really charming things. The one I'll never forget. All the women got together on Thursday night at somebody's house. They put on their best dresses, they wore gloves and hats, and they went and played canasta and had tuna casserole. And it was the big social event.
Wow.
And it was something else. But you know what the other thing was? We knew we were poor. We kind of knew we were on the bottom of the stack, but nobody smacked us in the head for it. And we had a sense of optimism. We thought things were going to get better, and for most of us, they did.
Right.
I don't think you see that today, and that bothers me a lot. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think you're right. A lot of hope and optimism with our young people has gone away. When we see what's happening in today's society, when 18-year-olds are getting access to automatic weapons and massacring people, it's horrific, right? It's horrifying. But to think that a young man of 18 years of age, are full of that much hatred. Something is wrong in our society. And the politics we have today is not helping that, Peter.
Well, the division certainly is not. Something else I can remember, later on, probably around 1960, I had a job working in a drugstore. In 1960, I wasn't old enough to drink then, but, every once in a while I'd go out and have a pop. Because, we were able to, it was 18 drinking age, and every once in a while we could get access to a pop. If I had a bit of a hangover and I wanted an aspirin, I could go over to the shelf where the aspirin was, open up the bottle, take one out, and covered back up because people weren't putting cyanide in aspirin bottles to murder random unknown people.
Right.
And it was about that time that the craziness started.
Right.
And I'm not really sure what happened in society, but the idea that someone would randomly murder someone, someone would study, somebody from Conklin, from Binghamton would study and then look up on the internet where the poorest people in the country were that he had access to. Where's that? The city of Buffalo on the east side. And he would, based on that study, come and murder people he didn't know, could never have known, didn't know if they were saints or sinners or evil or anything else. Because of, what was it, replacement theory? He thought these people somehow or other were going to replace him. Where, in Conklin?
Yeah, right. It's bizarre, right? But when you think about where these young kids are getting this from, obviously social media is something that it has to be looked at. We have to examine what we're allowing on social media. At the same time, we got to make sure we don't trample on people's right to speech. All of these issues, the Constitution, I think you and I talked about this in the past. And the Constitution was written so long ago, maybe it's time for some modification. Just think about the gun laws, right? When the Founding Fathers were sitting at the Buffalo Club or at the Country Club at the time, having a Coors Light or maybe a Blue Light, and saying, we really got to make sure that people have the ability to protect themselves. And they were probably cleaning their muskets at the time.
Oh yeah, there were smoothbore muskets that you could fire once every 30 seconds, not 25 rounds,
right.
On multiple pulls, and it was kind of to defend yourself against the government and the revenuers and the people who were searching your house illegally. It was a different world. Right. And remember, though we have all these rights in the first 10, no rights are absolute.
Correct.
Okay? The classic example is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, etc. We have generally a right to free speech, but maybe we have to revisit our current standards on hate speech. And this hurts me to say this, by the way, because I volunteered for the American Civil Liberties Union in Buffalo for 30 years, okay? And by the way, the New York Civil Liberties Union abandoned Buffalo. I got a hat. That's all that's left. They claim on their website that they're still in office and there's a phone number, but they fired 3 people and they're gone. I can call New York City and maybe talk to somebody. That's as close as I can get. Right. I really like the idea that we have pretty much unfettered free speech. I actually, in the past, have been a defender of hate speech as free speech, but now all the consequences of this are causing me to have second thoughts.
Right.
How much hate speech can we find? Did the founding fathers know about Facebook and Twitter? No. Television? Speeches by presidents who were, quite frankly, mentally unhinged?
Right.
Essentially advocating, for mass violence.
Right. Well, when they were sitting around chatting about 2A, nobody ever probably thought someday there might be a computer, and that computer might be able to make a gun, and that gun can shoot multiple rounds. And they probably never thought that there'd be a weapon out there of mass destruction, really, that with the squeeze of a trigger, multiple bullets come out. So the times have changed, and it's time to adapt. And that's why when I hear people say that there's no need for more laws when it comes to guns, well, yes, there are. There are times when you have to adjust the laws that are in place. And I think now is the appropriate time where everybody in this country, the majority, I should say, is at least in favor of universal background checks. They seem to be in favor of red flag laws. And there seems to be a lot of support for changing the age for an assault weapon from 18 to 21. These are reasonable ideas. But why can't the Republican leadership in this country see that there's a need, number one, and that they should stop pandering to the special interest groups, this one happening to be the NRA, right, and listen to the people they represent? When are they going to be able to show the public that the Republican Party has the ability to lead like they once did? That no longer exists in either the Democratic Party, Peter, or the Republican Party. I don't think there's very much difference between the political bosses on either side. They both are on the same mission, and they both have the same objective: how to build power, all right,
and get money.
not policy.
Get money.
Raise money, assume power, and forget about policy. That's what's happening.
It's power, control, money. Well,
They say money is the root of all evil, right? Generally speaking. In politics, it's borderline criminal. You and I both know that. We have a system which I call the Incumbent Protection Program, similar to the Witness Protection Program. But this is a program that's designed, a system that's been designed to protect the incumbents. And because of that, you have officials who have been in office for a long time that actually forgot why they were elected. And they are protectors of the institution. The institution becomes more important than the people that put them there. That's where we are. And until we change the campaign finance laws, nothing good can happen.
now, I certainly don't disagree, and raising money seems to be the only goal of most politicians, or many politicians certainly. People don't attempt to get in public office today because they want to do good things for the people. They get in public office today so that they can stay in public office.
Right.
And it reminds me of a congresswoman we once had who called me up one day and said, "Hi, Pete, would you give me $1,000? And I said, "What? That's crazy. Why would I give you $1,000? No." That was Kathy Hochul. That's back when she was our congressman for a short period of time. I barely knew the woman. There was no preliminary, no nothing. "Pete, hi, how are you? Or do you give a damn about anything? Pete, give me $1,000.
Right.
What? And it's gotten worse since then. That was a number of years ago.
Was that when she was
She was in
proponent
Congressman.
of the NRA or after?
Well, she was 100% rated by the NRA. She was anti-immigrant, and she wouldn't go to the Democratic National Convention because there was too many liberals.
Right.
Now that she's New York City liberal, Kathy the chameleon, she assumes the color of whatever background she's in. And as you know, New York State is 70% dominated by New York City, Long Island, its environs.
Right.
Montauk to Rockland is 70 to 75% of the vote. And boy, whatever they want, that's what she's in favor of now.
But and that's an interesting example. Think about it. When Andrew Cuomo was governor, he raised the last election cycle, if I'm not mistaken, $30 million that he spent of his own money. Then there's the PACs and all the other pieces. So $30+ million he was able to raise. Now I got to tell you something. I've raised money over the years, in 25 years in elected office, and it ain't easy, right? Unless you have a well-orchestrated pay-to-play operation. And obviously Andrew Cuomo had that. And the people have been tying the dots, connecting the dots between campaign contributions and legislation. It hasn't changed. It's still the way it is. The people who give money, unfortunately, to elected officials these days, most of the time are interested in something. They're not just doing it because Peter's a great policy maker. His policies, ideas are great. Giambra has these wonderful ideas about merging, consolidation. They're donating money because they know that's the way the system works.
Joel, I've heard that the expected rate of return on contributions is 100 to 1. If I give you $1, I expect to get $100 back in government largesse. And boy, if you look at our political contributions through the years, first off, the bank doesn't give me that kind of return. But boy, somebody out there owes me an awful lot of money. That's all I can say. And
Hello, right.
Kind of reminds me of the late Jimmy Arcady, who always used to say, "Pete, you're stupid. You support people because you think they're going to do a good job. You should just support your friends."
God rest his soul.
God
rest his soul.
Maybe he was right, by the way. I don't know.
He had a lot of wisdom at times.
But okay, let's get back to you a little bit. Okay, so you grew up in the Lakeview Projects. Where do you go to high school? Where did you go to college? How'd you get involved in politics?
Yeah, Pierre, I went to Holy Angels Grammar School, where I was educated by the Grey Nuns and the Oblates. Again, a whole nother experience in my life that I wouldn't trade in. Went to Grover Cleveland High School, Erie Community College.
Now, this Holy Angels, Is that the one that's by Father Bell Community Center?
The one on Porter, not far from Father Bell, but on Porter.
Okay, what's the church by Father Bell?
Holy Cross, of course.
Holy Cross. So which holy did you go to? You went to the Angels, not the
I
Cross.
went to the Angels, not the Cross. They were our arch enemies in basketball and baseball.
Okay, so there was a war of the holies, a holy war.
It was a holy war, absolutely.
All right. So then you went to Grover Cleveland.
I did. And I went to Erie Community College, which is another area that I've talked about for a number of years. And then off to UB for a couple of semesters, never finished my 4-year degree.
Okay.
But I was elected to the city council at the age of 24.
What year was that?
1982.
When did you first run for office in politics?
I was 21 years old in 1978. I ran in 1978. There was a vacancy, an unexpired term, and then I lost that election. The following year, I ran for the full 2-year term. I lost. The third time I won, and I had 11 straight victories after that. City controller, city council member for 9 years, city controller for 8, and county executive for 8 years.
Okay. I think I probably met you first in '82 or got to know you over OTB, Western Region Off-Track Betting, which I don't know if you've noticed it's in the news again, but it's always been corrupt.
It's in the news.
Do you remember when you guys subpoenaed those people and brought them in and grilled them back in '82?
Well, Peter, the worst thing that ever happened to the people on the board at WROTB is when you were appointed to the board, because you are the one who brought out the fact that there was all of this political patronage, there was potentially illegal activities happening, but it was obviously you were able to point out that it was nothing but a public benefit corporation designed to generate patronage. And at the time, you remember, the Democrats and the Republican party bosses had an arrangement. What was the arrangement? We're going to whack up the jobs. So I won't bother you, you don't bother me, and life goes on. And the taxpayers get the abuse. So those are the things that you were able to bring to the attention of myself, and if you remember, God rest his soul, David Ritecki, who was a member of the county legislature at the time.
Vinny Lavallo was on the committee at the time.
Vinny Lavallo. And that's right, yeah, they put the 2 Italians on the OTB committee, go figure.
All these people with a vowel at the end of their name. You know, Reese, Ritecki,
well, Ritecki,
Lavallo, Giambra.
Ritecki thought he was Italian, but he was really Polish.
Okay. And you guys subpoenaed these people in. And what happened when you used the Common Council subpoena power? Did they run right in and say, okay, we'll answer your questions?
No, unfortunately, they hired lawyers and they tried to quash our subpoenas. I remember at the time, I think Victor Farley was the Republican chairman in Erie, and as chairman of the committee, I authorized a subpoena to have him testify, and a lot of other electeds and appointed officials, and they all went to court, and at the time, Penny Wolfgang, I believe, was sitting, and she agreed with quashing the subpoenas.
Okay. Well, those were fascinating times. And just so you know, I gave a lecture to the Common Council about a year ago about subpoena power, and I referred to that, and I believe that's the last time the Common Council used its subpoena power. I mean, the supreme body of the city is the council, and if a majority or 2/3 of the council gets together, they're running the city.
Right.
End of story. It's not the mayor. The mayor does what the Common Council tells him to do. But it isn't easy to do that.
No.
Okay, let's get back to you. So you were council member. I think you became city controller after that. You know, like when did you move up to controller?
1989. Bob Whalen, remember, was city controller. He was appointed to the Supreme Court, left a vacancy. The council appointed me. Again, there was 1 year left on his term, so I had to run for the immediate office, and then I had to run the following year.
Run twice,
back to back.
And Bob Whalen was a friend, and he lived down the street in Amherst at the time. And when I was on OTB, whenever I needed financial assistance on anything, he was right there. And Jimmy Griffin appointed me, and Jimmy Griffin didn't talk to Bob Whalen.
Right.
And it was a great source of discomfort to Jimmy that I would talk to Bob Whalen, and Bob Whalen would give me help. And I think it really upset Jimmy that I could be working for him and Friends of Bob Whalen too.
It probably put you in bad light with the mayor, I assume.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But what it finally ended it was when we supported Cuomo in '82. This is Mario Cuomo. Cuomo won. And as you well know, you were there too.
Yes, sir. I was the first elected official in the state of New York to endorse Mario Cuomo for governor.
And when
and Joe Crango threatened to destroy me politically.
When you and I got on board with that campaign, and it may have been at the same luncheon at Andy's restaurant on Niagara Street.
Correct.
He was 39 points down in the poll.
Yes.
And everybody said you're committing suicide, and if they saw you walking down the street, they walked over to the other side.
Correct.
Because you were anathema.
Right.
But amazingly enough, he won.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he didn't remember a lot of the people that helped him. But, I mean, the governor probably, if you remember, spent more time trying to cultivate his enemies than working with his friends. But
yeah, you're right. And it's really hard to know. I mean, should you oppose someone or not? And that certainly left us out in the cold because it kind of destroyed our relationship with the mayor.
Right.
By the way, did you see that John Scanlon passed away the other day? Okay, and John, I always thought was a cool guy. He was the guy that smoothed off the rough edges for the mayor. He was and you know, the priest in the sermon that he gave at his funeral service said, John never closed the door, never closed the window to anybody. But I remember that he was the ward healer guy. And you know what? This must have been funny on the other side, and you and I didn't see it. But the Griffin people and the Krangle people were together with Ed Koch.
Right.
And I can't imagine how that was because they couldn't be in the same room.
Right.
You know, if there was a chicken in a room and they were together, the karma would kill the chicken. You know,
I remember.
I wish I'd been a fly on the wall at some of those meetings.
Well, being a young man entering the business in those days, one of my assignments was to pick up Hugh Carey one night and to drive him to an event. And there was the same issue, if you remember, between
wasn't
Hugh
Carey supporting Koch?
Krangle, and Griffin, right? There was that triangle there. That was.
But wasn't Carey supporting Koch, and Cuomo was his lieutenant governor?
Correct.
I think that's what it was. I mean,
Correct.
It was crazy.
Correct.
And then, of course, Koch lost. Cuomo wins the primary. And what I remember with John Scanlon, the mayor's people came over to the Cuomo campaign. And I remember that, I mean, we were thin. We didn't have people to work polling places. We didn't have people to, do signs. It was a small group of people.
Right.
And Scanlon and the Griffin people came over as an army and unified, and they delivered.
Right.
Okay, and I was always impressed with John over that. And it was just no baloney. John just showed up and said, here we are.
Well, that was the beginning.
We lost the primary. We're Democrats now. We're on your side. What do you want us to do?
Wasn't it the beginning of the split between Pete Elia, Andy, and Griffin?
Could well be.
On the primary race, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that it really bothered me because I got in trouble with the Cuomo people too afterwards, saying, they kept bad-mouthing Griffin and the Griffin people. And I said, what are you talking about? They lost the primary.
Right.
And they said, okay, now we're on your side. And remember the general election was against Lou Lerman?
Right.
And he was viable. He was a multi-millionaire. He could have beaten Cuomo. There's no two ways about it.
Right, I agree. But again, that is what's wrong. I mean, that we have become so partisan in our country, in our state, at the local level. The school boards are being infiltrated with issues not dealing with education, but social issues, right? And we are paralyzed as a nation. And the reason I'm running for state senate is not because I want a job. I already had a career. Now, some will say it was an illustrious career. Some will say it was a terrible career. But I guess the voters are going to get a chance now to opine on that career. And the reason I'm running for state senate, Peter, is because I've seen it. I've seen it from the outside. I've seen it from the inside. And it looks a lot worse, and it's a lot worse on the inside than even it appears to look on the outside. And how the game is played, how the incumbent protection program works, how campaign contributions, pay to play works. And that's how the system is functioning. And that is why nothing good happens. Because the special interests control the dialogue and they control the flow of policy. And that, again, is why we are in the situation we are today.
Okay, I want to get back. Let's finish off your career a little bit, or get back to politics. Whether it's finished or not remains to be seen. Huh?
Right.
I don't want to use that term. You were a Democrat all your life, and you decided to run for county executive. I believe you became a Republican to run for county executive. You ran against Dennis Gorski. You beat him. When was that? How'd that come about?
Well, Peter, when you think back now, I'm just reflecting back on my tenure in my involvement in politics. And I've had trouble with party bosses from the first time I sought public office, when Joe Krangle, your former neighbor, was chairman during the Cuomo race. I was elected to the city council. I represented the west side of Buffalo, predominantly at the time Italian-American. And Chairman Krangle, Boss Krangle, wanted me to endorse Ed Koch. First of all, I had no knowledge of Ed Koch at the time. I knew about Mario Cuomo. I had some familiarity. So politically, I'm not going to support Ed Koch over the will of the people of my district. So I remember Krangle telling me at that time, if you don't do what the party needs you to do, I will take you out. And I said, Mr. Krangle, you do what you have to do. I can't go along with this program.
I just have to interject here, okay? Joe lived 3 doors up. And we were never good buddies in terms of politics. But you know what? I used to shovel his sidewalk. I mean, I snow blow the street here. Sometimes I snow blow the whole block because I don't want people walking and staring at him. I always snow blowed this. I always said hello. We were never at war. I mean, I remember after 9/11, Joe bought a bunch of American flags and came and gave them to everybody up and down the street. If I saw him at a bar, I'd buy him a beer. We'd say hello. We never hated each other's guts.
Right.
We were on the other side, but, we didn't want each other to die.
Right.
Today, they want you to die.
Right. To finish the story, so that was my initiation with Boss Krangle. Then, as a Democrat, I was city controller at the time, and I was talking about crazy things like, how do you make government work better, smarter, and cheaper? Why do we have so much governance and so much government? So I started talking about ways to reduce the cost and the size of government. Well, at the time, Steve Pigeon, if you remember, was the party chairman, and he didn't particularly care for the message, eliminating patronage jobs and the like, and that was his job as chairman, right, to run the party and get as many patronage jobs as possible. So we were at odds on that. So the Republican Party came to me in 1989. 1999, I'm sorry. And Bob Davis was chairman, and he said, we really admire what you're trying to do. It fits right in with the Republican philosophy of less government, more cost-effective government, and so forth. So he asked me if I would change parties and consider running for county executive in 1999. And at the time, I said, well, the Democratic Party doesn't seem to care for what I'm doing. The Republican Party is interested. I've spent now 18 years in City Hall. It's time to move up or out in the world. So I decided to run for county executive against an incumbent Democrat who had almost $1 million in the bank and had a 3-to-1 party enrollment advantage. And we were able to win the race for a lot of different reasons. I think shelf life was an issue for the incumbent, but we were presenting alternative ideas. And some of them might have been out there a little bit, I admit. But they were ideas because I knew, and I subscribe to Albert Einstein's theory of insanity, right? If you think you can do things the same way all the time and get a different answer, it's insane. And we still have some elected officials who fall into that definition because they're not willing to do anything different. But they think they're going to get different outcomes. It can't happen.
Now, when you were county exec, who was your idea guy? Who was your deputy county exec?
I had 2 deputies, bipartisan, if you will. Bruce Fisher, who was a Democrat at the time, and Carl Calabrese, who was a Republican. And we had, if you remember, Peter...
Those are 2 quality people, just so you know. I know both of them and respect both of them.
And
I think Bruce is still a Democrat, isn't he?
He changed to Republican, but I think he went back after we left County Hall. But what we had was a fusion government. We had Democrats, we had Republicans, we had independents. And if you remember, Bob McCarthy had coined this term, Giambrocrats,
Yep.
which was a combination of Democrats and Republicans coming together. And I'm circulating petitions right now, Peter, for an independent line in November called the Fusion Line, because I believe it's time to bring people together, Democrats, Republicans, and let's figure out what we can do. Let's not fight about what we can't do. Let's show the public that we have the ability to do the people's business.
Are Bruce Fisher or Carl Calabrese involved with your campaign now at all?
No, Carl, I think, I don't know if he's still living in the area. I think he's in Florida in the winter primarily, but no, they're not.
Okay, just wondering. Now, let's talk about your race this year, because I find this fascinating.
I'd like to have them both involved, though. How's that?
Yeah, well, Bruce is a Facebook friend, but all the time, all he ever does, he puts up, he's rowing in the ship canal. So I think he's still a professor at Buff State, but I think he must be professor of rowing. I think he's the rowing coach, because, well, actually, you know what? He puts up a good article. He puts up a good opinion piece now and again.
Yeah.
And he's a very deep guy, and he knows what he's doing.
He's in the top 10 brightest people I've ever worked with, Peter, and you're in that group, too.
Stop it.
I'm serious about that.
No, but the long and the short of this is, look at, Democrats love to primary each other, even though I got to admit the Democratic Party has almost stamped out opposition in Erie County. It's getting to be virtually impossible to get on the ballot.
The Incumbent Protection Program goes back.
It's beyond belief, and now that we have winter petitioning, it's virtually impossible. We used to be out in June petitioning. I'd be out in this neighborhood. We'd go out at 6 o'clock. The people were getting home. We'd go out and get 30, 40 signatures. Now it's dark at 5:30. They're getting home at 6. It's a blizzard. They don't want me coming around. We had COVID. I mean, it's been almost impossible. But it used to be the Democrats had primaries all the time, but the Republicans never had primaries, because that's a mortal sin in a Republican Party. You never primary in a Republican Party. It's it would be better that you ate your children than that you had a primary. But you're the endorsed Republican in some district, which I think it used to be called 60, but now it's 61, because they kind of flip things around.
Right.
And seriously, you and I were looking at the maps the other day, and we found out we're no longer in that district.
Right.
Okay? Tim Kennedy's my senator now.
I'm still not sure where some of the boundaries are. Yeah.
Well, and it's very hard to know, and what I love to tell people is, we don't send people out with maps, we send them out with walk sheets, list of voters, and I still can't produce proper lists. But neither here nor there. The Republican Party endorsed you. The Republican Party circulated a Republican Party designating petition for you. You're on the Republican line, but now, as far as I know, and I was at a Republican event the other day for our PAC. We are the Buffalo Niagara No-Kill PAC. We went to John Garcia's event, primarily because I've heard very good things about him, and I want to recruit people to the no-kill movement. Right. So Alan and I went. And the Republican regulars are crazy. They all have veins and blood in their teeth, and they're eating babies, saying, well, what's wrong with that Giambra guy? He's not stepping out of the way. Our endorsed candidate is Ed Rath, and we're circulating petitions for Ed Rath. Now, I know Ed Rath. I like the man, okay? And, we worked together on charter revision, and I don't have any problems with Senator Rath. But his district used to be like from Amherst to Rochester, and now somehow or other it's it's the west side of the city of Buffalo.
Right.
But we're a lump out of it.
Right.
We have a wealthy neighborhood here. But what's going on? Tell me, what the hell's going on in the Republican Party? The Republican machine is having a war against itself. So
right.
Which Republicans are on your side and which ones aren't?
Well, I guess we're going to find out who the real Republican Party is in Erie County, for sure, and maybe the state, because this might be a microcosm of the state, this district, when you think about urban, suburban, and the ethnic and geographic diversity that exists. But it goes back to Peter, I think I just have a hard time with party bosses, because Chairman Langworthy, while I'm a registered Republican, and I have jousted about the whole idea of how do you rejuvenate the Republican Party? How do we provide competition? And I had very specific ideas about open primaries and the like, and obviously the bosses don't like that because you lose control. So again, I think the first issue is I have problems with political bosses. And when I decided to come off the sidelines and get back involved to try to raise these issues about the Incumbent Protection Plan. And we're going to be talking about a myriad of issues, Peter, over the next 8 or 9 months that are going to be different, where I'm going to challenge the system. I'm going to challenge the duopoly that we have. When the Founding Fathers were sitting down and going through their whatever they were doing with the Constitution, right, they worked hard to prevent any political parties, I think they called them factions at the time, from being able to control the government. And they worked very hard because they knew that would be a problem. Well, they never anticipated that there would be a duopoly, that there would be two parties that control all of government throughout the country. And in Albany, for all intent and purpose, we have one party. All right? And that is what we have to challenge. There is no balance. You're either a hard left Democrat these days or you're a hard right Republican. Well, who is protecting middle America? People like me, who are mainstream Americans, who are fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. And if the Republican
That's
Party...
everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty... Well,
Who's
except
not?
for the right-wing Republicans.
Or the far left
who don't
Democrats.
want anything to do with me because they can't control me. So that's the reason I'm running, Peter, to raise these issues so that we can go back out there and tell people, if you really want to have better outcomes, you gotta blow up the system. The system is wrong. It's bad. It's corrupt.
Now, if you win the election, you're a Republican, you're going to be in a minority in the Senate. Does that mean you're going to work with Democrats?
Peter, I am going to work with anybody who wants to try to get something done. Compromise is the art of life. It's certainly the art of politics.
So you would talk to a Democrat?
I would talk to them. I'll have a cocktail with them. I'll even have a bite to eat with them.
Oh, my God. I don't think that's going to work.
Well, that's the way it should work, right? And that's what I'm trying to bring back. I remember on the city council when there was Republicans at the time. The Democrats had a majority, but there were Republicans. And I remember debating philosophy with Bill Marcy and some of the other Republicans there. And then afterwards, we'd go out, have a sandwich, and maybe a beer. But it was civil, and we got things done.
You know what's interesting to me? Bill Marcy and Bill Hoyt, who had very different philosophies, were best friends.
Best friends.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine that today. Now, at Garcia's fundraiser, it turns out we talked to John. We like the man. And we've got
John's
some ideas.
a good man.
We you know, everybody I know said he's a good man.
He
and
is.
it turns out he belongs to the Sandy Beach Yacht Club, which we used to on the North Shore of Grand Island. That's 20 years ago we belonged there. And you know, we have a few things in common, but we're going to be talking to him, you know, about some issues that are of concern to us. And the man's the sheriff.
Yeah.
And likely, by the way, will be as long as he wants to be. And that was a fascinating race for sheriff. Do you realize that the endorsed Democrat and the endorsed Republican both got clobbered?
Right.
I mean, that has got to show you and tell you something.
That's why I think the door is open for independent candidates. We have to break the barriers, and we have to, you know, obviously attack. Look, again, I keep saying Incumbent Protection Plan, but that's what it is, Peter. Everything is structured around your mail. You get to send out franking mail, political mail, before the election with yours money and my money. It's called franking, right? And there's millions of dollars that are being spent by incumbents to bolster their political reelections, right? And we all know there's not a whole lot to do in Albany. We've both been up there because it's a hierarchical system based on seniority. And if you play ball with the bosses, you get the better offices, you get more money, you get more staff. So they control everybody. And there's so little to do that all you can do constructively is try to raise more money every day. Because if you raise more money, the best way to deal with the Incumbent Protection Program as an incumbent is to raise as much money in the off years so that nobody even thinks about running against you. So what's the solution? Campaign finance reform. Maybe public financing, where a challenger has the same level playing field as an incumbent. That will shake up the system. You'll see turnover. But as long as the incumbents have the advantage with the way the whole system is designed, challengers are going to have a tough time winning elections.
Well, it looks like a banana republic to me right now, quite frankly. I mean, it really does. And, you know, with the redistricting that was done, which was found by the Court of Appeals, which is dominated by Democrats, found to be illegal, things have been shaken up, and there's going to be more competitive districts, certainly in the future. But I mean, if nobody's willing to talk to anybody, if no one's willing to work for anything, and what I found interesting, this was just, you make impressions based on whatever, but with this fundraiser, and it was like the Republican Party regulars, and they're mad dog Giambra haters. You're a socialist. How dare you stay in the race? And I said, wait a minute, he's your endorsed candidate. You're circulating a petition board. How dare you stay in the race? But the other half of the crowd were like more reasonable people, and I guess maybe they were the friends of John Garcia, but they were really nice. And I was out serving papers and doing some other stuff, sweaty, running around. I met my wife there after work, and so I had my New York Civil Liberties, NYCLU hat on, and people hated my guts because I had this hat on, and I'm sitting there saying, geez, you guys like the Second Amendment. You don't like the other ones either. Well, the ACLU stood for all 10, last I remembered, But I mean, the people were literally irrational. And so I had to kind of hide by Rick Donovan, the former, I guess he was deputy county sheriff for a long time, because he came wearing a pair of shorts, too. So it was okay then.
Well, look what happened just recently with Congressman Jacobs.
Well, they want to run him out of Dodge.
They want to take him in Niagara Square and hang him.
They're talking about running Nick Langworthy against him for Congress.
I believe I hear they're circulating petitions with Nick Langworthy's name on them. The man came to a decision, all right? And I respect him for the decision he made. I'm sure it was a tough one where he put his political career on the line. But he stood up and he did the right thing.
But you know what else? He's from New York. We already have an assault weapon ban. Okay, his entire congressional district is in New York. And he's basically saying on a federal level he could vote for an assault weapon ban. And his vote probably won't matter. All right? And didn't Tenney say the same thing? I think she did. So, it's not like he's the Lone Ranger. But they literally want to lynch the man now.
I wrote to Mitch McConnell on Monday, basically begging him to just do something, to show the American public that we're not paralyzed, that the Republican Party is not in favor of mass murder. It's not in favor of massacre, and that we have to do something. We're not going to agree on everything, but let's do what we can. And there are 3 or 4 pieces that would strengthen the law, all right, without trampling on a person's right to have a firearm. These are reasonable, I think, amendments to the existing laws.
And, Sarbanes-Oxley, I had an AR-15 and I had an Uzi 9mm carbine. They were a lot of fun. I used to take them to the plinking range. It was a lot of fun making empties. Okay? I mean, I have more firearms and I do more reloading than any liberal you ever met because I'm an engineer in school. And I enjoy doing it. By the way, I could never hunt anything. In fact, I am a cowardly carnivore. If I had to kill my own food, I'd be a vegetarian tomorrow. Okay, I don't have the guts to do it. That's part of being no-kill. I'm not a vegan, but I respect them. But I got rid of them. I gave it up. But you used to go to the target range. Every other guy had an AR-15. They're not there anymore. Everybody seems to have complied in New York State. It isn't the end of the world.
Right.
And yet somehow, I guess you can go to a gun store in Erie, PA and pick up an AR-15 and drive it in over the border. And the last time I saw, they're not searching cars.
That's why a reasonable solution would be a universal background check. So let's make sure people who are buying guns in other states where the rules are different or at gun shows, which are really lax, that we tighten those requirements. And you know what? I talk to people who are legitimate gun owners, right? And they're not opposed to reasonable regulation.
Either am I.
They have children in school, right? They have maybe black relatives. People understand you have to have control, right? You have to have boundaries.
Joel, in New York State, you have to get a pistol permit. It's considered to be the most restrictive state in the union. Ellen and I have pistol permits. In fact, we have carry permits so that we can carry anytime. And, the reasons why and whatever is nobody's business.
Right.
It's my own. But the long and the short of that is you're supposed to be able to get it in 6 months. It took, I think Ellen got hers in 12 and mine was in 18. And what's funny about that is I had a secret security clearance, but she didn't. So who knows? And we had judges that, were our references. It's pretty hard to see how it took so long. And I believe in reasonable regulation, though. I mean, if it says 6 months, you should get it in 6 months. And in Niagara County, people were getting them in 2 or 3 months, and with me, it was 18 months. So, I mean, that sort of thing wasn't reasonable. That bothered me, but we've got it. And I just don't see it as that big a problem. My life is not ending because I can't go down to the local drugstore and get a Saturday night special.
Right. Again, I'm all about the right to bear arms, but you have to have reasonable regulations and rules. Remember, when they made when they drew up the Constitution, they were dealing with firearms that could not kill massive amounts of people. The times are different.
And we're not easy to reload, and you couldn't snap another magazine. You're right. And also didn't have the firepower. When in the Revolutionary War, when they lined up against each other and fired, they had to, because the weapons were so inaccurate, you couldn't hit the side of a barn with them. The ball came out and it went wherever it wanted to go.
Well, even with the early pistols, right? They only took 10 paces.
Yeah.
Because if you were at 11, the bullet would fall out of the air.
Yeah, or it would fly around and go off crazy, and So, I mean, you practically had to shoot somebody in the side of the head for it to work.
Right.
It's a different world. We have to take that into account, and I just, I like to have the right to bear arms in this country. I want the right to bear arms to defend myself and to defend my home. That's what I want.
And you should be entitled to that.
I'm not, and I know people who go to public demonstrations. We have a right to peacefully assemble and petition our government for redress of grievance. I know people who take firearms. Well, I'm sorry, that's not peacefully assembly.
No.
When you got to take your gun and show everybody you got a gun.
And I'm all for the right to free speech, right? And I'm all for the right to protest. But when you cross the line and you start looting and vandalizing, that's where you draw the line.
Nobody can be in favor of that. And by the way, my rights can't infringe on yours. Okay?
True.
If your demonstration makes it impossible for me to get down the street, if I can't get to work because you blocked a bus route, there's something wrong there. How about letting the bus through? And I'm not saying, it stopped for a couple of minutes. I'm talking about you blocked the road.
Right.
Well, excuse me, who the hell are you to say that your rights are superior to mine?
Fascinating, right? Fascinating.
And yet, they're, I've got the right to do this, I got the right to do that. Okay.
We're going to have to come back for another show.
Well, I think you are. Now, we're 48 minutes in, and I've done a lot of talking. I'm just trying to think other things that we might want to talk about. One
Let's
that's
talk about the Bills Stadium.
Bills Stadium. How do you feel about that?
I think it is the worst deal I've ever seen. I was involved in negotiating for the construction of Pilot Field when I was on the council, for the hockey arena when I was city controller and council member. I never saw such a lopsided deal in my entire career or heard of one. As a matter of fact, every newspaper from here to New York City opined how bad of a deal it was for the taxpayers, except for, of course, the Buffalo News, right? So let's forget.
What's the job of the Buffalo News, by the way? Do they reprint press releases or do they report on things?
Well, I'm not sure, because the publisher, if I read correctly, was on the group of business people that the Pergulas assembled to advise them on this project. So I don't know how that happens, where the publisher, I think, was involved with helping to decide how much public money was going in and where it was going. So let's just put aside for a moment the deal, whether it's too heavy with public money or not, whether we should be giving $1 billion to a billionaire whose employees are all multimillionaires, and we're paying for 80% of the playpen, and we don't even get to say where it should go. 5 people, I think, decided how much public money was going to be contributed as part of this deal.
Who would those people be?
It would be possibly Terry, Kim Pagula, maybe Ron Raccuia, Mark Polinkars, and probably the governor.
Wow.
And there might have been some staff in that.
That's pretty staggering, you know.
But not one public hearing. There was no intent to adhere to seeker. When you invest these amounts of public money, there should be a process that requires public hearings, economic analysis. It's mind-boggling that this was rammed through the way it was.
Doesn't state law require an environmental and an economic review anytime there's a project of any kind of magnitude, let alone one like this?
Peter, my understanding is that there are a number of lawyers in town who are looking at this very issue to determine whether or not there was any violation of the law. Because it makes no sense to me, Peter. I remember, all right, for 25 years in elected office, making speeches, talking with people about the 2 worst public policy decisions in your lifetime and mine, probably. Maybe there might be more. You're a little older. But the 2 that I remember, right,
I'm very old.
are the stadium.
My hair is whiter than yours, too.
Not too much, but 50 years ago, 50, they decided to put the stadium in Orchard Park because we all know Cottrell had Lancaster. There were lawsuits. Politicians went to
We
jail.
were going to have the second Astrodome here, remember?
The Buffalo News didn't want it downtown. The Courier Express did. Remember the fight?
But remember, we were going to have the second Astrodome. Can you imagine what that might have done for the downtown?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So 50 years ago, I was 14 or 15 maybe at the time, attending Bills games at the Rock Pile. Every year, for many years, I would go to the game with my uncle. And it was in the inner city. It was fun, right? But it was old and tired. So we had to build a new facility. So somebody decided, let's see if we can take a big hunk of concrete, put it in the middle 50 years ago of nowhere, and see if it generates economic activity.
Right in the heart of the snow belt.
Right. Well, I'm sad to report the experiment is over. It was a failure. Not one really new business moved in around the stadium.
There's not any convention centers or big mega hotels around it?
Birch Bikes. Birch Bikes opened a beautiful store in Southwestern.
Okay, and I'm sure that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the Bill Stadium.
Probably not.
Yeah,
a couple of restaurants, but it's not providing any benefit, Peter. So why are we doubling down on a mistake that was made 50 years ago when there are options to put the stadium in an urban setting that generates economic opportunity and prosperity for the people around it? You don't put the stadium as far away from the black and brown community as possible and say we're going to achieve economic prosperity for that community.
I live in North Buffalo. Can I take a bus to Orchard Park to the stadium?
No, you probably couldn't even take an Uber.
Yeah,
you probably wouldn't go out that far.
And you know, there's too much traffic on that day. How many times a year will we use that stadium?
10, maybe, if we're in the playoffs.
You know, what if the Beatles get back together? Maybe they could come into town for that? Of course,
Well, I
two
don't
of them are dead, right?
I don't know how many concerts Mick Jagger has left in him, but we might be able to get a Stones concert back. And we joke about this, but you think about how sad it is. $1 billion of our money.
For a limited use facility.
For a limited use facility.
And this is admitted to be the 3rd poorest city in the country, but you know what? The areas of the city that I travel in where we do work trying to rescue cats and things like that, doing crap neuter return. And I'm not talking about areas where we have minorities. I'm talking about where there's white people. There's huge white poverty in the city of Buffalo.
Yes.
It's not a surprise at all to me that this is the 3rd poorest city in the country. And you know, I have friends from New York City who read stuff in the New York Times about what a renaissance we have here. I'm not seeing it. I mean, my neighborhood's doing well. I'm doing well. But the average person in Buffalo is not. Now, what about a downtown or a centrally located facility that has an opening roof, where we could play multiple sports, where we could have concerts, where we could have conventions, where we could do something all the time, next to a train route, where people could come in and get it? Isn't that something we should be looking for?
Yes. Yes, and when you think about it, I think the model that the Bergulas are looking at is similar to a casino. Let's keep all the revenue inside the building, right? If we have bars and restaurants and hotels around the stadium, people are going to go there, eat and drink, and not spend the money in our place.
Well, we already have a model for that. We have the Seneca Casino in Niagara Falls. Has that brought infinite, boundless prosperity to Niagara Falls?
As I predicted, and the reason I fought using the convention center in Buffalo for a casino is that it would not generate any real economic opportunity. And again, the experiment is in.
No, in Niagara Falls, it's
Niagara Falls.
desiccated downtown Niagara Falls. I'm old enough to remember Beer's department store and going to theaters there and restaurants. I remember when it was a downtown.
Right.
It's
Peter, it's sad.
Pardon my my French, but that casino has 4 concrete asses that face out at the world, and once you're in there, you're not supposed to leave.
Yes.
And if you get out, if you find your way out of there by accident, that's all it is. It's an accident. And everything around it has withered.
Right. If you look at Patriot Place, where the owner owns the stadium, decided that he was going to capitalize and develop the area around the stadium, right? So they built Patriot Place, shops, restaurants, hotels, housing. They surround it, and now you have a destination. We'll never have a destination in Orchard Park. The 15 million tourists who travel through the falls by accident, by the way.
To see a wonder of the world,
Right.
which is just down the road.
Right. Would travel to a stadium in downtown Niagara Falls if you had the Patriot Place concept. Shops, retail, tourists. I've been hearing for years the people in Niagara Falls, the hoteliers, the convention people say, we have to have, it's imperative that we have more inputs.
I remember a few years ago, it was so bad in Niagara Falls that the mayor was talking about paying people to live there.
Right.
That's how bad Niagara Falls is. I would prefer it was in downtown Buffalo or at the Central Terminal location, just because I'm a Buffalo bigot and we've lived here for 45 years. But rather than Orchard Park, a limited use facility, one that was in Niagara Falls that was used 7x24 like the Rogers Dome in Toronto is, and it's 30 years old, it's obsolete. 3 field sports.
Right.
Concerts, conventions, you name it. When I was there viewing the facility, just for the purpose, I took a tour of the facility. There wasn't even a game going on. When I was there, they were setting up to do a motocross.
Yeah.
They were building big piles of dirt for people to race their motorcycles and jump over hills and make turns. I mean, you can do anything you want there. I like the pitcher's mound is hydraulic. So it's a bump in the field and it goes up and
Right.
down. This is done very cleverly. 3 field sports. They play soccer, football, and baseball.
Right.
Is it the best in the world for everyone? No. Who said we needed an optimal stadium for every sport in Buffalo? Where's it written that we have to have that? How about if we have something we can use?
Hello, right? Peter, I'm not suggesting any one site. I said an urban site. And we could if we could slow if I could call a timeout and say, yeah, let's do some public hearings. Let's do some economic analysis. Let's find out how to best leverage this $1 billion of public money. That's what I'm asking for. A chance to see if there's a better location. And I think the public deserves it, and I'm going to try to do everything I can to make that happen.
The only attempt that I saw to have public input was the county legislature, I believe, had a series of hearings on it. And I believe that the people were 99-1 against building another stadium in Orchard Park. The councilmen in Orchard Park don't want it.
What did they do? They went forward with a unanimous vote.
Wow. I mean, is that democracy? I thought democracy meant that you tried to carry out the will of the people.
Right. And Peter, I think that stadium designed properly could turn around Western New York and connect us with Southern Ontario. Because whether it's at Paderewski, the one possible location, or whether it's in the Falls, the key to the future of the Bills, and I'm not sure Terry Bergula realizes this yet, but Ralph Wilson did, and he shared it with me every year when he and I met when I was county executive.
You were his landlord, right?
I was the landlord.
For 8 years. When you were county exec, you were the landlord.
Yes, and we would get together once a year, and his biggest fear was that the economics of Western New York would never be sufficient to support an NFL franchise because he saw the way it was going with the billionaires, the Jerry Joneses of the world, and so forth. And he knew that the future was Canadian customers. So if you can put this facility that has access to train, and the Torontonians and the people from Canada can take the train across the bridge,
Which they can.
into the stadium,
Doesn't the GO train go all the way to Niagara Falls?
it stops on the Canadian side. We haven't figured out yet, the Canadians and the
Does
Americans,
the tracks run across the gorge?
that the
That's
train
pretty amazing, isn't it?
has the physical capability of coming across. And Peter, we built a $45 million train station in Niagara Falls to accommodate those trains, and there's an office for customs
Yes.
in the train station.
That is a gorgeous station, okay? And, we're partially Field of Dreams, but, part of the, if you build it, they will come. Well, they built it and it ain't coming. If you go to that train station, I wrote a couple of articles for the Old Art Voice about it. It's a ghost town. It's an absolute
Terrible.
ghost town. And it's a wonderful, marvelous facility. It's exquisitely well built and well done, and there's nobody there.
I have a plan we're going to talk about next week that connects downtown Buffalo, our new $25 million train station we just opened on
Right.
Exchange Street, with the $45 million downtown Niagara Falls station. And we'll come on the show next time. We'll talk about that.
All right. Look, I think that's a good place to stop off. And I'm looking forward to learn more about the Republican Tong War that's going on here. Thank you very much for showing up today and talking to us. And we hope the people who listen to this are informed and are as entertained as we are. We had fun talking, didn't we?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again.